Hello, everyone, and welcome to our March Fireside Chat. Thank you all for joining us today. My name is Ronak Sheth. I'm the founder and CEO here at Lit Videobooks. I'm thrilled to be hosting this insightful and impactful discussion with Adrian Gostick and Chester Elton. A little bit about who we are and what we do. So Lit Videobooks makes reading best-selling business books as enjoyable as watching a movie or a documentary with our new format, Videobooks, featuring interviews with best-selling authors, animation, infographics, expert interviews with people mentioned in the book, and they're really immersive and entertaining. And please stay tuned. At the end of the chat, if you'd like more information on how you can get access to our growing library. Just a little bit of an overview of what to expect today. So after introducing Chester and Adrian and learning more about who they are, their backgrounds, and what they do, we'll be getting right into our discussion surrounding today's theme, which is reducing anxiety and building more resilient teams. We'll be showing a few short clips from Chester and Adrian's Anxiety at Work video book, and then we'll be taking a deeper dive with the authors into many of the topics that are within the book. We'll then be reserving the last 15 minutes or so for a Q&A. You can pre-ask your questions in the Slido link, which is in the chat. You can also upvote any questions that you find interesting. This will help me, Adrian, and Chester know, what you want covered and your thoughts on a specific question. So without further ado, let's get started. As I'm sure you already know, Chester and Adrian are a powerful duo. They're the authors of the New York Times bestsellers, USA Today bestseller, and Wall Street Journal bestsellers, All In, The Carrot Principle, Leading with Gratitude, and Anxiety at Work, which we'll be discussing today. Their multiple award-winning books have been translated into over 30 languages and have sold more than 1.5 million copies around the world. Also, successful speakers and coaches, Adrian and Chester have co-founded The Culture Works, which is an innovative platform for employee engagement, leadership development, and cultural transformation. So let's go ahead and welcome our amazing guests, Adrian Gostick and Chester Elton.
Hey, Ronak, how are you?
Hey, Chester. Hey, Adrian.
Hi, Ronak. Hey, good to see you.
Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you for joining us. We're so excited to have you on, especially since we just released the Anxiety at Work video book.
Yeah, listen, we're very excited about that. I remember hearing about it, and it took us a while to get in the queue. You've got a lot of people want to get on this platform. And so when we finally got our chance to do the video and experience your team and experience the platform, we got very excited about another way for executives and people that just want to invest in themselves to learn, grow, and develop. And well, that's my story. But Adrian always has something better to add, and so I'm going to turn it over to you, Adrian.
Well, and this book, Anxiety at Work, is probably our most mission-driven book we've ever created. It's an important book, an important subject, and so Ronak, your team has just done a phenomenal job bringing this to life in 29 minutes. We didn't know you could create such impactful content in such a short time. So yeah, thank you for all you and your team have done, Ronak.
Yeah, and by the way,
thank
Ronak,
you. Thank you for. Please go ahead.
Yeah, I've just got a quick story I want to share with people because, you and I talked about, when the video books are a little, you've got from 30 minutes to 50 minutes and so on, and how people watch. And, Adrian can relate to this, but as authors, and if any of you are listening are authors, you know that your family and friends never read your books. Like my wife has never read a word of any of the books that Adrian and I have written, but she's very good with design and graphics. And so when we got the rough cut, I said to my wife, I said, hey, Heidi, why don't you just take a look at the first 5 minutes and tell me what you think of the graphics and stuff? And she goes, oh, okay, great. So 5 minutes go by, and I said, so what do you think? She goes, hold on. She watched the whole video, Ronak. Like, that is the best testimonial I can give anybody, that the graphics and the music and everything is so engaging that my wife, who would never read a whole book, was captivated for 29 minutes. So
Well,
thank you.
she knew I was in it, Chess. So I think that was probably why.
Yeah, Adrian's the
That's
eye.
definitely it. No, thank you. Thanks so much. It's a huge testament to your amazing author interviews and our team. We're doing our best to have your amazing work reach the broadest possible audience and drive the most impact. And so yeah, thanks so much. Just a quick question for you, if you could just, for those of our guests that aren't so familiar with your work and anxiety at work, would you mind kind of just introducing yourselves and also share a little bit of background on anxiety at work?
Oh, I'll jump in. Yeah, thanks, Ronak. Chester and I, we've worked with organizations around the world for 25 years now. We work mostly in culture. We help organizations figure out their mission, vision, values, where they're going. We do leadership development, executive coaching with some of the world's biggest and most successful companies. And over the last few years, we've noticed, before the pandemic, we noticed a real trend, especially with younger people, where we saw a lot of mental health issues that they were starting to talk about at work. My son has anxiety since he was young. He started working in labs. He's a geneticist and has brilliant mind. And he was saying, "Dad, do you ever talk about anxiety in the workplace?" And we said, "Oh, no. We never talk about mental health at work." "Oh my gosh, no." And he says, the statistics show 1 in 5 people has an anxiety disorder. He says, imagine 1 in 5 people were coming to work every day with broken arms. Would you talk about broken arms? Well, of course. And so that's really the genesis of this, where we realized young people to a person were talking about their mental health. As oldies, we were never talking about it, and that had to change.
Yeah, it was so funny in our first conversation with Anthony when he said, "You oldies never talk about it," which, made us feel, as you might guess, old. But it is a generational thing. Then when we took a deep dive on the numbers, is that, our generation, it was like, just rub some dirt on it, get back in the game, just calm down. And one of our favorite quotes is that never in the history of calming down has anybody ever calmed down by being told to calm down, right? So the 8 strategies that we, researched and put in the book, we found were really helpful for people. We did a lot of research, we took a deep dive in the numbers, and then we talked to a lot of practitioners and a lot of therapists and so on. In fact, we even have an ongoing podcast called Anxiety at Work, where we bring in really interesting people. And how do you deal with it? Not only at work, of course, which is our focus, being business authors, but how do you deal with it, after work and in your personal life? As Adrian said, we've written a lot of books together. I think our most mission driven and I would say our most important book really is Anxiety at Work, because it impacts people on such a personal level, such an emotional level. I mean, when you are suffering from anxiety, debilitating anxiety, I mean, nothing in your life is good, right? And when you have rituals and techniques and so on that you can use to deal with that, everything gets better. And so we're very proud of the book and really proud to be on the Lit Video platform.
That's amazing. No, I think that there's been a lot of change, I think, in the last few years. A lot of companies having layoffs, and then AI, and so many kind of drastic, rapid changes that probably have led to a lot more anxiety across the workplace. And so, couldn't think of a more kind of timely and relevant message to put out there. So thank you for writing the initial work and being such great partners. Uh, I know, you shared a little bit about kind of like the video book process, but just a question for you, kind of how was your experience actually creating a video book? Of course, the full book is much longer, right? And so how was your experience? Could you tell your guests, as the authors, what was the overall experience seeing Anxiety at Work go from a book into a video book and a new format?
Yeah, I'll jump in on this one. Your team was amazing. We sat down, they gave us all the questions. What I really liked about the format is, you know, Adrian and I haven't written the book and spoken on it for well over a year. Uh, really familiar with the content. So often when you do videos, particularly when they're scripted, I mean, they are scripted and you're reading a teleprompter. And as hard as you try to not look like you're reading a teleprompter. People know you're reading a teleprompter. They just do. And what I really appreciated about the whole process is that it was very conversational. Your directors would say, "Hey, tell me a little bit about perfectionism," or "Tell me a little bit about, uncertainty," and so on. And we could just talk. And then I think you guys shot somewhere between 12 and 14 hours of video between us and Nabila El Sayed, who was our guest in the video book. And to take all that and then cut it down to these wonderful little capsules and snippets that looked very natural and very conversational, because it was, I found, made it much more engaging. So that was my take. The direction was great, the pacing was great, and it was a conversation that we were having, with the viewer. Adrian, what was your
Yeah.
takeaway?
What I liked, Ronak, was that we do a lot of interviews. A lot of people interview us, and sometimes they'll say, "So you wrote a book? What's it about?" Well, the title is Anxiety at Work. It's kind of a little on the nose, but your writers, your producers, everything was so, on page 47, you have it was so specific. That was great. And then also you flew to interview one of our clients. Walmart Canada, when the book came out, bought 4,000 copies for all their managers of Anxiety at Work. They believed so much. It was the theme that year of mental health and wellness. And so they believed so much in the product. Well, you flew to one of our clients and interviewed her, and as Chester mentioned, the chief operating officer of Walmart Canada. You went and said, "How did this work in your organization?" And it was really powerful to have you not only, talk to us as the authors, but somebody who was using the product to see how it really was resonating.
It's amazing. I'm so glad to hear. I'm sure if our production team is on here, they're going to be thrilled, and they also really enjoyed working with you. Yeah, I think it's really important for us to make sure we're having, a fun kind of narrative conversation. Otherwise, you're right. No matter how much you try to make a teleprompter not seem like it's staged, it's very hard to not look like that on camera. And so we've learned over time that having a really good kind of detailed conversation where our production team goes through really every page of the book and has a long list of questions that they want to have with you, but in a period of 4 hours or so, that turns into a lot of content that for them is very hard to cut down into 30 minutes, but I'm glad we were able to create something that you were satisfied with. And yeah, the expert interviews are super important, because of course, they want to hear from the authors who are the experts on the subject matter, but showing that how the work within, the tactics within anxiety work were actually relevant in a real life scenario really help as well. So glad to hear that, the experience was great. Excited to dive in more and share some of the video book. So just quickly, for anyone that has any questions, please drop them, in the Slido link, and we'll get to them towards the end of the chat. So normally we would just jump right into our discussion, but since the video book just came out, would love to show a sneak peek and an introduction, if we can. So I'm going to quickly go on mute as we play the first clip.
Look, you're a duck. And the idea is you're gliding across the pond. You're looking just so serene and beautiful.
You look calm and confident, and you're just the best, and your life is beautiful, and I've checked out your Instagram. You're amazing, right? Underneath, you've got all that anxiety going.
You're paddling like mad just to stay afloat, to stay upright, to stay moving. And that's really what we found with the duck syndrome, is that so many people feel like, I'm a duck. I'm not able to admit that I'm really struggling here in the workplace.
Now, the thing that's worrisome in the workplace is it's not safe to talk about it. So one of our goals is to reduce that stigma, to just say, hey, listen, this is something that literally everybody suffers from. Because if we can reduce anxiety, if we can make it safe to talk about that, everything gets better.
Look, I'm a duck, you're a duck. Let's admit that we're all struggling, and let's help each other.
Anxiety at Work: 8 strategies to help teams build resilience, handle uncertainty, and get stuff done, by Adrian Gostick and Chester Elton.
brilliant.
Amazing.
I was almost moved to tears. You know,
It's amazing
yeah,
seeing it.
I just want to jump in and say that your crew in the editing was unbelievable. I mean, the way the story is told, and because of the graphics and the sound effects and everything, it really is engaging. The video is really high quality. The storytelling is so important, you know, and the back and forth and so on. I'm sure we'll have a clip with Nabila coming up soon. Um, I just find this way of learning it's so different than a TED Talk. You know, TED Talks are great. I've got nothing against TED Talks. This is much more immersive. I mean, you really do find yourself in the presentation, and you want to watch it again. I mean, it's really interesting. I've had friends and family say, you know, I watched that thing like 4 times. Every time, you know, I watched the whole thing, which I thought was a great testimony to the editing and the graphics and everything else.
Thank you. Our animation supervisor is going to be very happy to see that. He had a lot of fun on the animation here. Wanted to start off with a question for both of you. So, you know, you've written 14 books. I think there's more coming together, and material comes from, you know, a lot of the work that you do with businesses and leaders, advising executives and coaching. And just a question for you, like, when or why do leaders or businesses reach out to you? What tends to be kind of happening inside the organization where they say, let's bring Chester and Adrian in to help?
Sure, I'll jump in on this one, Ronak. You know, sometimes people ask us because we deal in culture, we deal in, you know, leadership development. People say, "Oh, you must get called in some really tough situations, you know, really diseased environments." And the truth is, they will never ever call us. The bad companies don't believe in culture, don't believe in what we do, don't believe in any of this stuff, and they'll stay bad companies. And sometimes people come to us at a big conference and they'll say, "Oh, my company really needs you." And they'll give us a litany of terrible things that happened. And we'll say, "Yeah, they're not going to call." What we get called in is from really good companies that want to keep improving. They want to keep pushing themselves, want to get better and better, that really believe that people drive their organizations. And so when we look at a book like Anxiety at Work, when we get called in to help with wellness and resilience and building a really strong, resilient, hardy culture, we get called in from companies that recognize this is really important. And so, you know, we have a good job in that way, is that usually we're preaching to the choir and they're looking for specific ways to move a little bit forward, to take those next steps in their journey of building really resilient, great cultures.
Yeah, and I would like to add to that it's still a tricky subject, right? And so we'll go in and they'll hire us for a keynote or a workshop or whatever. And like Adrian said, our umbrella is culture. So we'll talk about how you know, engage, enable, and energize your people and so on. And then I'll often offer up and say, by the way, you know, our latest work on a really healthy culture has to deal with mental health and anxiety. Would it be okay to, you know, take some time and address that? And I've often had leaders say, yeah, can you call it resilience? You know, they still don't want to call it anxiety or mental health. And you go, yeah, sure. You know, would a rose by any other name. So it's still a bit of a touchy subject, although when you get into it, and this is what I find fascinating. So we'll talk about culture, we'll talk about anxiety or mental health resilience, whatever label you want to use. And we always end in gratitude, right? That's the common thread that we find in all these great teams and cultures and leaders. But when you ask people at the end, what was the most impactful? They'll say, you know, that part on anxiety was really important to me. And they'll often say, not only for me and my team, but my kids. It's how often do people say, I've got a 25-year-old son or kids in college or kids that are in high school. And those things that you pointed out are really going to help me, not only at work, but at home. And that's where, as an author, you kind of touch your heart and go, we're doing something, you know, really valuable here. So those kinds of conversations and how do people approach it, they may come at different ways. It's always helpful and it's always impactful because it's the first time maybe some of them have felt safe even talking about it.
That's wonderful. Yeah, it's certainly not an easy topic to bring up, or for a leader of a company as well. In any way, they need to kind of be trained to know how to approach it. So it's amazing work. And I guess like from more recently, and some of the conversations you had, some of the keynotes and workshops with leaders and teams, what do you see that they are struggling with in particular?
One of the biggest things is overload. People are just doing more with less. That's been the mantra for a decade now. And it's been exacerbated by, the hybrid work and the remote work, because now as a leader, you're trying to manage three different kind of workforces, right? The people that are present, the people that are remote, and the people that are here sometimes. And so that kind of overload and that kind of stress has added a new dynamic. The number one cause of anxiety in the workplace is just uncertainty. The pandemic really shone a light on that. Back then it was, can we even come to work? I mean, how do we come to work? And, can we shake hands, or do we wear masks or don't we wear masks? And who's vaccinated and who isn't? So that caused a lot of anxiety and stress. And we thought that post-pandemic that those numbers would start to come down. They really haven't. So this idea of dealing with uncertainty, being really clear and concise about what the work is, how the company's doing, how you're doing as an employee, really helps. And then this overload, really watching your team and being careful and dealing with burnout are two of the biggest. Now, we talk about 8. Those are 2 that were top of mind for me. But Adrian, I know you've got a couple you want to share as well.
Well, it's a great question, Ronak. What's really on top of minds of leaders today? A lot of the presentations I'm doing right now are sort of titled "Leading Through Ambiguity," because Chester's right. This idea of uncertainty, ambiguity, whatever you want to call it, we're all facing it. And every leader that we talk with says to us, look, change is now part of our business. Doesn't matter if you're running a hot dog stand or you're running, a multi-billion-dollar business. Change is just part of our vernacular. It's part of our lives. We're facing new competitors. As you mentioned in the beginning, AI is coming in. Everybody's uncertain how that's going to affect their business, especially your people. And so what do leaders do in uncertainty? Well, they say nothing, because they don't have all the answers. Well, none of us do. But we need to feel like we're going into the dark together. I need to feel like you're with me on, that you're looking to the horizon, even if you just let me know, look, I don't have all the answers, but this is the things we're looking at, and we need your help. We need your ideas. We need you to be a part of the discussion. As an employee, there are really a few things that you need to tell me. First off, where are we going as an organization? How am I doing? And do I have a future here? Very simple ideas. But that brings down my anxiety levels considerably when you really address those ideas for me, and you start being more decisive, you start being more, you communicate more about the ambiguity that we're going through. So there are some ideas that we start talking with organizations about to bring down those ambiguity levels.
That's wonderful. Yeah, it's so important. I think it's still hard for leaders, but when you frame it as 3 simple questions, right, it makes it a lot easier to be able to kind of communicate on an ongoing basis. So thank you for sharing that. And so a little bit more about today's discussion. So we're going to be focusing, of course, on reducing anxiety and building resilience, as Chester mentioned, what leaders like to hear. And we'll be focusing on 3 of the 8 strategies that Chester and Adrian have laid out in the video book. So we're going to go ahead and watch another clip from the video book, which identifies the number 1 driver of anxiety in the workplace. So go back on mute.
To combat this, Gostick and Elton came up with 8 strategies to reduce anxiety in the workplace. The first of these strategies is deal with uncertainty,
which is really the number 1 driver of anxiety in the workplace. Sometimes we hear this statement of, my people, they just need to get comfortable with being uncomfortable. Well, uncomfortable is in the word. How would people get comfortable with this? So that's not a management strategy.
Instead, we should make sure we're communicating clearly, even if we don't have all the answers.
I think the key thing is just constant communication and clarity.
Nabila El Sayed worked with Elton and Gostick while she was the COO at Walmart Canada.
I think one of the great things that we learned with working with Chester and Adrian and through Anxiety at Work, again, is that you don't have to know the answer. Clarity is kindness and transparency is kindness, and making sure that you are as clear and transparent as possible with your teams, and to say you don't know when you don't know.
She's great, isn't she?
Amazing. Yeah, we're grateful to be able to interview her. So yeah, I think, let's talk about identifying this type of anxiety. Where do you kind of see this type of anxiety most present? How do we know if team members are struggling with anxiety around uncertainty? Kind of what kind of behaviors might they exhibit if they're feeling that?
I'll jump in on this because sometimes we'll say, well, as a leader will say to us as we're doing a training, they'll say, look, I can spot if somebody's anxious. They talk really, really fast. And some people say, no, they talk slower. They get, and the trouble is everybody is different. We're all unique in that way. Some people will talk faster as they get anxious, some people less. What you are looking for are changes in behavior. And that really is the only way to identify if somebody really is starting to get toward burnout. Is maybe they're the first to offer up ideas in your meetings, whether remote meetings or together meetings, but they've become quiet for a little while. Well, that's a change in behavior. Maybe they're always on time, but they're coming in a little later. That's a change in behavior. So you're really looking for changes. And the only way to identify changes is that you know them. And as managers, we have to be a lot more aware, or team members too. We have to be a lot more aware and astute of looking for, how are our teams doing? And sometimes we can't see it all. So, if you're on my team, I say, hey, Ronak, how's the rest of the team doing? Is there anybody you're seeing that might be, struggling a little bit today or recently? And so really, you have to be more aware than you've ever been before.
Yeah, it is interesting. We talk about those changes in behavior. And as I present, I always like to talk to groups and say, how many of you have a superstar on your team? And they all raise their hands and say, they never disappoint. They never miss a deadline. Their work is always top drawer. And so when you get really busy and the pressure's really on, what do you do with those high performers? They go, load them up, baby. Because they'll work 18-hour days. And I say, look, I can almost guarantee you that your top performers are almost always your most anxious. They'll never say no. They'll never disappoint. The thing is, they're really good at hiding it. And so that's where what Adrian's tips there are so important, is to really tune into your people and know when they're about to burn out. And of course, we always joke that the last thing in the world you want to do when you suspect that someone's really struggling is to go up and say, Ronak, watch this video book on Lit, and it was about anxiety at work. And you check all the boxes, man. You're anxious, aren't you? And so how do you start the conversation? And that's where it got really interesting for us, when they say, the way you start the conversation is, hey, Ronak, I noticed you've had a tough time coming to work on time, or I've noticed that you're starting to, get a little irritable and lose your temper just a little bit. But when I say I noticed, it gets translated to I care. So some of those techniques in the video book are really helpful, because you can't just come right out and say, listen, you're just really struggling. What the heck's going on with you? That doesn't help anybody. How do you approach it in a way that's kind? I loved when Nabila said, transparency is kind. Clear communication is kind. If your default is kindness, then it's a little easier to gain people's trust and have them talk about tough issues. Kind of makes sense, doesn't it?
Yeah, that actually perfectly teed up my next question. But I was going to say that when you're able to show that you really care, right, about the other person, and I learned this from the video book, it's a huge, it makes a huge difference in any kind of difficult conversation that you want to have. So really appreciate that. I think transparency can sometimes be challenging. And so, are there kind of any markers we can set as leaders to be sure that we're communicating in a way that is resonating with our team and reducing anxiety? And that I think that the second part of that question is, how can we navigate being transparent when we are not allowed to divulge sensitive information?
And this is one of the reasons that people, oh, sorry, God, let me just say something quick, then I'll let you go, Chess. This is one of the reasons that people get so hesitant about sharing, that they may be struggling, is that my boss is going to share it, or, and no, you do need to keep confidences. That's really important, and so this idea of how do you help somebody, and we actually spend a whole chapter in Anxiety at Work on this idea of really how you share feedback in a more calm, deliberate, and caring manner. Because there's a difference between nice and kind. Kind is, I'm going to tell you if you've got asparagus in your teeth. Nice is, I won't say anything because that's rude. Well, nice isn't helpful to anybody, but it's kind, where we can be a little bit more direct. And one of the things I learned from Chester was this idea is that 3 words that will change your leadership style are, may I suggest. So instead of, look, Ronak, you gotta be more forceful with your clients, no, it's, Ronak, may I suggest that you think about, it's just such a kinder way to think about this, but you're still giving very strong feedback. You're directing the person. There are ways to present feedback in a way that is a little bit more direct, but not so harsh that people, don't come to you anymore.
Yeah, it's always a little tricky, the confidence issue, the trust issue, right? Because you never really know. And when it's something as sensitive as mental health, it really can be the third rail for people. In fact, we looked at the numbers, and only 10% of employees feel safe even talking about it. So that means 90% won't. So how do you create that environment? Nabila is a great example of this, by the way. She would go out in front of all her leaders and say, look, let me tell you my story. And that's hard, for leaders to be vulnerable. You always want to be the strong one. You want to be the one that's always upbeat, And she would say, look, I have worked on some of the biggest brands in the world, and I worked myself to death. She introduces herself as a recovering workaholic, right? And she'd say, I don't want that to be your life, because it cost me relationships. It cost me my marriage. It cost me my health. And so don't be that way. Don't do what I did. Make sure you take time off. Now, as she was sharing this story, she was taking questions. And one of the people in the group said, well, Nabila, easy for you to say that now. You're the chief operating officer for Walmart Canada. Would you have gotten that position had you not made those sacrifices? Brilliant question, right? I mean, put her absolutely in the crosshairs. And her answer was beyond great. She said, yes, I'm confident that I would have gotten to this position. It would have taken me longer. And knowing what I know now, I would make that trade. Well, when you can be that vulnerable in front of your people, it makes it safe for them to be vulnerable, right? And so building that kind of trust, I think, that's one way to do it. Another way is just right up front say, by the way, that everything we talk about is confidential. I'm not going to be sharing this with anybody. It's in the vault. And just to state it up front takes away a lot of anxiety. And then if you can share your story, that's the next level.
It's amazing. That must have been such a hard, story to share in public. So that's wonderful. Yeah, I think these tactics are amazing. Really appreciate it. I see there's a lot of people in the chat, which is great. If you do have any questions that you would like to ask Adrian and Chester, please add them into the Slido link as well. And I would like to kind of move on to our next strategy for today, helping employees chart their path forward. So let's go ahead and share another clip here.
Our fourth strategy to reduce our people's anxiety is chart their path forward. A Gallup poll looked at the top reasons for people to leave their jobs.
It was the Hay Group did a study and said, what are the top reasons people leave? You'd expect that the top reason for a long time was pay. I'm going to leave for more money. It was interesting that the Hay Group said, particularly for millennials, that it was growth. I want to learn. I want to grow.
One way to help our workers grow is by implementing more steps up the corporate ladder.
And so we've had some really interesting companies where they said, look, we used to say, look, you're an associate, and then you become a senior associate after 2 years, and then a manager after 5 or whatever. The length was too long. there wasn't enough progression. So he said, what we did was we said, okay, you're an associate, and after 6 months, you become a junior associate, and after another 6 months, you're a senior associate. And they created this stair-step ladder where I had very succinct goals, very succinct timelines, and I could progress. And I felt like I was moving forward.
For many workers, the ideal trajectory isn't just up.
My generation, it was the corporate ladder. You had to be moving up. And if you weren't moving up, you were failing. Now, careers are more like a rock wall climbing. I'm here, but there's an experience or there's a skill I want to learn, and it's over here. It may be perceived as a lateral move for my career. For my development, though, and my skill set, that's where I want to go.
Employees may be looking for, the growth versus a pay raise question, right? I think is super important, and, an incentive to stay within the organization. As leaders, what can we do to kind of add more steps to the ladder, or create that rock wall where people are comfortable to kind of move, in a different direction than the ladder? And what do you think are the major risks if we don't implement these systems?
Yeah, I mean, let me start this one off. Let me answer your last question first. The risk is you'll lose good people. I mean, that's the biggest risk. We go to a lot of trouble to qualify people, to hire them, invest in them, and so on. And then when they leave, not only does it leave a big gap, but then you've got to go through the whole process again. I think, what's really interesting about that kind of approach is motivators for a lot of people, again, are growth and development. And listen, I'll use my one of my sons as a perfect example. We'll call him Garrett because, that's his name. And he was working in video editing and was working with really great people. He really liked the people and he liked the work. The thing is, it was a smaller organization, and where he wanted to develop his talents and so on, they didn't do that kind of work. So he said, it wasn't because I didn't like my boss or because I didn't like my coworkers. I did. It's just that there was nowhere to grow. And so he went and moved to a different organization. Now, sometimes because of your size, you may not have the opportunity to create a rock wall per se. For those that are a little bigger, it comes back to me what Adrian said earlier is, do you know your people? Do you know what they want to do? Where did they come from? How did they get here? What do they want to accomplish while they're here? And most importantly, where do they see themselves in a couple of years? And if you know the answers to those questions, then you can create that career path that says, hey, we really need you on this project for the next 6 months. I also know that you really have a penchant for marketing. And so once we're done here, I want to introduce you to the marketing team. We're going to do some joint, projects together, and I want you to be on that team. Well, that makes it a lot easier for me to go through the next 6 months, knowing that I've got there. My manager has my best interests at heart. They know me, they know my talents, they know where I want to go, and they're going to help me get there. Why would I leave?
Let me give you a client example with this. They've allowed us to use them in their book, so I'll use their name. Microsoft, one of our clients over many years, one of their divisions, they were losing a lot of their millennials coming in, their Gen Zs, would come for a couple of years and then put Microsoft on their resume and off they went. They said, well, how do we cut this? And what they began is having what they called aspirational conversations every month with their people. It could be 30 minutes or so, but they would sit down and they'd say, okay, where do you want to go in your career? How do I help you get there? I'm going to be pretty honest with you. You're going to have to do these things. So you're going to have to accept that feedback. And they would have these conversations. And the manager said, look, people come so excited to this because it's about them. It's not talking about why they aren't doing this or personnel issues. It's just about their careers. And they in this division we were working with, they cut their turnover from their first couple of years in half by just simply doing this once a month. Chester and I were working with a big merger with a couple of office supply companies that were coming together, and they realized they had to do this weekly to keep their people. This is a retail environment. And, and they were kind of, oh my gosh, that's such a huge commitment. Yeah, but how long does it take you to rehire somebody, et cetera? They found that was way easier than having to hire all new people every few months. So these simple ideas, are we meeting with our people? Do we know where they want to go in their careers? This is actually something, as a manager, I actually have a little control over. I can't give them huge raises. Yep. I can't give them better dental plans, but I can help them with their careers.
That's amazing. Yeah, no, I've seen the Rockwall example even at our company. We've had someone that was, helping with a lot of customer support that then was really interested in product development. And so we started kind of looping him in to some product work that we've been doing. And he's been, really, really excited to kind of grow in that sense. So yeah, really love the Rockwall example. And one more question that I wanted to ask kind of for this particular topic. It seems like ensuring a path forward yields lower turnover. Do you see that at organizations that have really low turnover, generally they kind of have overall much more resilient teams? Have you kind of seen that through your experience working with companies?
It's one of those things that people are starting to measure very carefully right now. And everybody by now has realized how expensive turnover is. So I really, there's few organizations that we work with that aren't worried about this. And is there a link between resilience? Absolutely. The longer that I work with an organization, the less my stress levels are going to come down. Because when you think about what's driving my fears as an employee are, will I have a job? Do I have a future here? Those are very important. So if you can bring my stress levels down, that I'm getting developed, the company's investing in me, the organization actually feels like I have a future here, you really are bringing my anxiety levels down. You're building my resilience, which really is my ability to bounce back when there are challenges. And there are always challenges. There's always stress. There's always changing things. And what you want to be able to do is people to be able to get through that and learn from it and grow.
Yeah, I think some of the best practices are in some of the best organizations that we've worked with, is this idea of having an ally. We talk about that in the book as well, and a mentor. One of my great friends and mentors who unfortunately passed away last year, but David Kashish, he was known as the guy you wanted to work for if you wanted to grow and develop and become a great leader. And the way he did that is he was very much a teacher and a mentor. And so if I'm struggling with my team or whatever, I knew that I could go to David and have that very candid conversation. He'd give me great advice. He'd follow up. And I was developing, not just as a leader and a manager, I was developing as a person. Incredible loyalty. As you know, your relationship with your manager has a huge impact on your engagement and whether you're going to stay or not. And it's so interesting, as Adrian and I talk more and more about a coaching culture, leaders need to be more coaches and mentors and teachers. And it's not lost on me that when you think back into your life, Ronak, and over and above like your family, right? Who are the people that had the biggest influence on you? It's almost always coaches, teachers, and mentors. So this idea of taking the information in anxiety at work and saying, how can I be a better mentor? How can I be a better ally? How can I be a better coach? Well, you're going to develop great relationships. You're going to mentor really bright and your future leaders. And it's something that the ripple effect is going to have. You will be remembered for that. And I think we all kind of want to, as leaders, we want to be remembered. We want to know that we had an impact, that we made a difference in somebody's life. And boy, when you start at the level of, I'm going to help you deal with your anxiety and your resilience and your mental health, wow, that kind of coach, that kind of mentor is life-changing, and it always will be.
Absolutely. No, thank you. These are all really great, and I think pretty simple and easy to implement in theory, of course.
Theory.
And being clear, transparent in our communication, ensuring the organization has, in addition to a lateral ways to grow kind of within the organization, like a rock wall. And we have one more topic for today. I know we're running up on time, so I'll only ask you one question for this next topic, but it's about fostering connections and social bonds. We're going to go ahead and play one final clip.
One of the great studies that we found was firefighters. This study was done that these people would come in to assess the crews, right? The teams, the firefighters. They found that firefighters that ate together got along better and were more cohesive. So how do we take learnings from a firehouse and bring it into the workplace? Are you creating pathways to develop relationships? Take people bowling, take people out to lunch, create pathways, because when I've got relationships at work and I care about the people at work, I care about the work.
Another way to foster these connections is through the 10 and 10 ritual.
I'm a big fan of symbols and rituals, that keep us on track. And I think it creates stability and a routine for your team as well, because there's expectations, right? We want to start and end the day on a positive note. So it's 10 and 10, 10 minutes at the beginning of the day and 10 minutes at the end of the day. And the team comes together and say, hey, here's what we want to do during the day. Here are our goals and so on. Has anybody got a great story? A great customer story, a great story about somebody that helped you out, really focusing on that positivity, right? And it gives you a chance to let people have their voices heard, to really instruct and share information and bring the team together.
And these check-ins don't have to just be about work.
It's knowing personal things about individuals that matter, and it's celebrating those things that matter to people. And when you do that, I think people just bond together more and they connect more. Just simply asking how people are, asking about their families, asking about their loved ones, and showing true interest and presence in those things is what matters.
It's amazing. I think it's great that these are all relevant to work, but I think they're really, impacting me personally as well, just for my own, family life and things of that sort. So I know we're running out of close to time, so I want to ask one question about this and then open up to the Q&A. So I guess a lot of companies are still, there's a lot of remote employees, a lot of hybrid employees. The idea of kind of, building social bonds, eating together, how do you kind of create that sort of workflow with, employees that are remote? If they can't be together in person, how do you recommend kind of building bonds and fostering, connections over Zoom?
It's a great question. And the trouble is everybody's trying to figure this out. So, because a lot of times we'll talk to a manager, they'll say, I'm struggling with this. And we'll say, it's okay. Everybody is. There's no perfect answer. To try things out. We've found groups that, for example, they found Friday afternoons at 3. It's a perfect time. And they call it their wine and wine. And so they say, look, we get together. It's near the end of the day on a Friday. We just complain about all of our projects, our customers, our bosses. We have a little sip of whatever favorite beverage we want. And by the end of the day, we're ready to just let it go. And so we come back in Monday fresh. They found what works for them. That probably won't work for you. But you try different things with remote. You have to be more attentive to your people than ever before. You have to include people. You have to make sure, if you have a round table on Zoom, let's go around before. What have we missed? You ask smart questions. You're challenging your people. As a manager, you really, and in a good way, you're more important than you've ever been before. You really are pulling people out and making sure they feel heard and appreciated.
Yeah, be careful with the wine and wine Friday. It can lead to hangover Saturday, if you're not careful. It's so funny that you brought that question up, Ronak, because Adrian writes a weekly article on Forbes.com, and his last article was 5 ways to deal with hybrid and remote employees. So I encourage you to go and read that. Adrian's spot on. It's checking in, it's communicating, it's knowing your people, letting them know you care. Whether you're remote, hybrid, or in person, that is going to be the rule. And obviously with remote and hybrid, you've got to go get them. You can't just walk over to their cubicle or pass them in the hallway. So you have to be very disciplined. You have to be very intentional about it. You may set up that for some, like Adrian said, everybody's a little different. You may set it up like, look, Wednesday afternoon is going to be our time, 15 minutes. And you just check in every Wednesday. Other people, it's going to be catch as catch can. And know your people, be disciplined about it, and make sure that they know that their voice matters, their opinion matters, and that you're checking in, not just because you want to make sure the work gets done, they care about you. And as you mentioned earlier, Renee, if my manager cares about me, I'm going to care about them. I'm going to care about the work. It gets better.
Amazing. Thank you so much for sharing your advice and your wisdom. And everything has been, I think, very, very insightful. I wish we had more time to ask you more questions, but now it's time to open up to the crowd. So I'm going to pull up questions that everyone has been asking. So first one, I am a manager and I have anxiety myself. do you have any advice on how best to deal with that as a leader so that my team feels supported?
Okay, I'll jump in here. It's interesting as we do sessions with leaders, typically there's somebody who raises their hands pretty quick and goes, "Oh, good. I thought I was the only one." And so sometimes we feel the negative, well, negative. There's a lot of negatives with anxiety, but one of the biggest challenges with anxiety is we feel alone. And so if you're feeling any sort of mental health issue, depression, anxiety, leading up to burnout, etc., typically what we do is we back off. We say, "Ronak, don't bug me. And we become more in a shell. Typically that's the worst thing that we can do for ourselves, but we do that. And so typically managers who feel this way think they're the only ones. Find a supportive network. And that's the biggest piece of advice here. And a supportive network is somebody who actually understands. I talked to a woman recently. She goes, "I keep telling my mom about this. She just tells me to cheer up and put on a happy face and stop talking to your mom. She will never get it." No, talk to her about other things. Don't talk to her about this because she's never going to get it. A supportive network is somebody who understands, who will be empathetic, and will help you. Sometimes it's just listening. Sometimes it's being empathetic, sharing their story. Find that network that will help you and be open, be vulnerable yourself.
Yeah, any kind of supportive group is going to be great. We do a lot of executive coaching, and you might guess that when you're the CEO or the president or whatever, who do you go to, right? Everybody's coming to you. Who do you go to? So groups that there are people at your level or in your industry and so on. That's why I think YPO is so popular in EO, and finding these regular groups that you get together, whether they have a regular dinner or breakfast. I live in New Jersey. The place is lousy with diners. You'd be amazed at how many people I see at diners gathering together, and it's their Friday morning thing or their Saturday morning thing. And that's where they can let their guard down and have those important conversations. Having a network, having a mentor, having a coach really does help. And if you don't have one, find one. Because if you're not healthy as a leader, the ripple effect through your team is if you're panicked, they're panicked. It's like when you're flying, when the flight attendants start to get frenetic and scared, everybody's scared. So you've got to lead by example. The last thing I'll say on that is, again, if you can show some vulnerability and just tell your team, "Look, I got a lot of things going on with my teenage son, and we're dealing with a lot of stuff. So if I get a little short, it's not you, it's me, and I may need to take some time off. So just give me a little grace, give me a little space." Wow, that opens the door to a lot of vulnerability and makes it safe for people to talk about it.
That's really, really helpful. I think, yeah, even personally, we have, an advisor that's built a similar business and has kind of gone through a lot of the challenges and things that I face that I can kind of always bounce an idea off of. If I'm, scared about something, whatever it might be, I have someone that I can kind of look up to and talk to that I know isn't going to judge me, right? So I think that's really, really valuable. Thank you. And a few more questions here. So one question, many immediately think that medication is the solution. How have you handled pushback on just talking about it and building a coping mechanism?
Yeah, here's where I think, your employee assistance programs are really important, that you know what is available. We're big fans of counseling. Adrian and I have had family members that have really struggled. And I will say for my generation, I was not a fan. I always thought that if you had to go for counseling or therapy, that was a sign of weakness. It's not. It's smart. Don't hesitate. And again, as a leader, you've got to make that available. Now, there are times when, look, medication is going to be the best solution. The danger is when you self-medicate, right? And that's when you don't have good advice. So yeah, if you've got the system set up, and particularly when new employees come in and say, "Look, this is how we're going to support you. Here's your dental plan, here's your medical plan, and here's the employee assistance plan," right? And please take advantage of all of it. And if you have any questions, here's who you call, or come to me. I've been at the organization for a long time. If I can be of any help, I'm gonna. So you set up the ground rules right up front. It makes it safe for people to talk about it.
A friend of ours did some research recently where I think he found like 99% of people say they go through incredibly stressful things during a year, no doubt there. They said only 20% of those people have a strategy for dealing with that stress when it comes, and only 1% of those people had a healthy strategy. And so, as Chester says, we self-medicate, we do bad things for ourselves, we overeat, we drink, whatever we need to do. We don't typically have healthy strategies. So as a leader, we're certainly not saying you should be a psychologist and, gee, Ronak, you should be taking some medication. No. You have to find your path. Maybe it is counseling, maybe it is some medication, but talk therapy is extremely important. And now as leaders, what can we do? We can listen, we can be empathetic, we can destigmatize the idea of any mental health issues within our workplace, and we can empathize. That's different than sympathy. Empathy is, I've been there myself. Tell me what you're going through. How can I help?
Absolutely. Thank you for sharing that. And we have time for one more question. So what are some ways to help senior leaders see the importance of employees having downtime, using PTO, paid time off, and prioritizing mental health? Sometimes corporate cultures can be very stressful. So, that's the question.
Yeah. Okay. I'll we go back and forth. It's just really interesting that, again, as Adrian said, as leaders, we think, we can't show any suffering, we can't show any weakness. I think as leaders, if you can lead by example in this, like Nabila did. And by the way, I just want to give Nabila a shout out if you're watching this, how much we love you and how much we appreciate your great work, is you've got to lead by example. You're going to say, hey, I'm going to take some PTO. And let me tell you why. We've been working long hours and I just need the time off. That gives people permission to do the same. Sometimes you've got, and this usually happens with new leaders and young leaders, where they just feel like they've always got to be on, they've always got to be pushing. They never take time off. One great example of a story that we got from a friend of ours was she went to go spend some time with her father, who was in the Navy in Hawaii. And as she was walking out the door, her leader came and said, give me your laptop and give me your company phone. Because they had a system where they had a company phone. And she goes, well, why? I'm gonna have to do something while I'm gone. She goes, no, be with your dad, be with your mom. It's a week. Trust me, we can survive without you. I know that's hard for you to hear, that we can't get along without you. We can. You need the downtime. Give me your laptop, give me your phone. I'll see you in a week. That's a great message for everybody.
It's amazing. Yeah, I think a lot of companies offer unlimited PTO, but there's a stigma associated with taking any PTO, right? And so I really like that approach. Thank you so much, Adrian and Chester, for sitting down with us today. It's been an absolute pleasure. And thanks everyone for attending. We will be following up this session with complimentary access to Chester and Adrian's video book. You got a little bit of a taste, but we'll be sharing complimentary access to everyone. And just keep an eye out for that email. Also, if you are learning and development, talent, HR, people leader, and interested in learning how lit video books can ignite engagement and change in your organization with anxiety and work, and many of our other video books. You will also have the ability to try our platform for you and your team, and that will also be coming in email. Lastly, we're very excited to announce our next Fireside Chat, which is going to be with Tiffany Bova, the author, a best-selling author of Growth IQ, who I believe Adrian and Chester know as well. So we're very excited about that. Keep an eye out. We'll be announcing that soon. Most importantly, thanks so much, Adrian and Chester. Very grateful to have you as author partners, and thankful that you stayed a little bit over time here and answered many of our crowd's questions. We can't wait to see you again, and just want to say thank you.
Thanks, Ronak.
Yeah, thank you for having us. And we are very excited about your platform. Adrian and I are continual learners. We're always looking for ways to feed our brains. And this new platform will do exactly that for you. So please give it a try. We're big fans. I know if you try it, you'll be a big fan too.
Thank you. Thanks, Chester. Thanks, Adrian.
Thanks, Ronak.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, everyone.